Blood Moon Bride. On the night of the blood moon, a human woman is accidentally marked as mate to two rival alpha brothers. She must choose before dawn, or both packs will tear each other apart, and her heart along with them. Before we get into our story, here's a reminder to subscribe so you don't miss out on any upcoming stories. Now for Blood Moon Bride. The first blood-red sliver rose over the pines as Mara Hale tied the last ribbon to the boundary stake. Wind pressed the forest flat, a low, lupin hush sweeping through the meadow, and every hair on her arms lifted as if the night itself had leaned in to listen. She checked the map again, the one the ranger left for volunteers, then laughed at herself for the trembling in her fingers. "It's just an eclipse," she muttered. "Not an omen." The drums began beyond the trees, slow, ceremonial, a heartbeat multiplied, rolling in from Blackthorn territory to the west. On the eastern ridge, a higher, brighter rhythm answered from the rival pack of Ashfall. Locals called it tradition. Outsiders like Mara filed it under folklore tourism, two communities reenacting their ancient rites under the same blood moon, separated by a crooked creek and 3 generations of grudges. She had come for graduate research, rituals, memory, the way stories became laws, and for the clean air that scraped city smoke from her lungs. Volunteers aren't supposed to be out after sunset. The voice came from shadow, quiet as a knife sliding free. A figure stepped into the spill of moonlight and became a man, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair braided close to his skull. His eyes caught the red glimmer and held it, not reflecting but absorbing, as if the color came from within. He wore a loose shirt rolled to the forearms, mud on his boots, and something like authority in the set of his mouth. "I'm finishing the markers," Mara said. "The ranger." "I'm not a ranger." His gaze flicked to the fresh ribbon, then to the creek, where fog braided itself into pale ropes. "You're on the fault line between packs. Tonight that's unwise. Is this the part where you threaten me with local curses?" She meant it to land as a joke. It sounded like bravado. The drumline surged and the moon lifted, full and arterial, painting the man's cheekbones in war color. "I'm warning you," he said, softer. "Go back to town." "Or what?" Mara asked, and the woods answered for him. A wolf stepped from the brush on the opposite bank, silver-gray, scarred across the muzzle, too large to be anything but legend wearing a body. Another shape moved behind Mara on the blackthorn side, a shadow uncoiling, first a ripple in the ferns and then a living weight of muscle and fur. She spun, heart hammering. The man didn't flinch. The wolves froze when they saw each other. The air tightened, string drawn. Then both lifted their heads and inhaled, and Mara felt, ridiculously, impossibly, smelled as if her name itself had a scent the night made visible. The silver wolf's ears pricked. The dark one's tail gave a single, questioning twitch. The man beside her swore under his breath. "This can't be happening," he said. "Not with her." "With who?" she asked, and the answer arrived in motion. The silver wolf sprang the creek in a clean, impossible arc. The dark wolf bounded from the brush. They collided not with teeth, but with a circling that was almost a dance. Their bodies brushed against Mara from either side, a storm of heat and bristle, and the world went thin and bright. The man lunged to pull her free. The wolf's shoulders struck hers at the same heartbeat. Pain, searing, electric, flashed across her collarbone, then bloomed into a fevered warmth that raced beneath the skin like spilled ink. Light unfurled. Not white-red, as if the moon had poured itself into her. Mara staggered. The wolves fell back, panting, eyes fixed on her throat. The man's grip tightened around her wrist. "Say your name," he ordered. "What?" "Your full name." "Mara Hale," she breathed, dizzy. He closed his eyes as if finishing a prayer he didn't want to speak. "Mara Hale," he echoed, voice shaking with awe or dread. "On the night of the blood moon, you've been marked." "By what?" she asked, though she already felt it, like twin cords tugging in opposite directions, a compass arguing with itself. The silver wolf's bones cracked and reshaped as if the moon had rolled them in its fist. A man rose from the change, barefoot, silver scars matching the muzzles, eyes the color of pewter rain. The dark wolf mirrored him, taller, darker, heat rolling off him like a forge. Brothers, Mara realized before anyone said it. Not just in face, but in gravity. The one beside her released her wrist and stepped forward. "I'm Cade of Blackthorn," he said. "Alpha." He inclined his head toward the silver-eyed man across the creek. "And that's Rowan of Ashfall. My brother." Rowan's gaze slid to Mara's collarbone, where heat still pooled like a brand. "She bears both," he said, voice roughened by the change. "Cade." "I see it." "Both what?" Mara demanded. Cade looked at her, properly, now, and for a heartbeat the forest fell away. "Both of our marks," he said, as the red moon climbed and the drums went from ceremony to alarm. "Two alphas. One human. One night to choose." Rowan's jaw flexed, tendons tight beneath skin that still seemed too new after shifting. He stepped into the creek, water licking his calves, the current catching the reflection of the blood moon and setting him alight in crimson ripples. "Mara Hale," he said, voice steady but edged with a growl. "If you walk back to town, the packs will scent war. Ashfall will see Blackthorn's mark. Blackthorn will see mine. They'll think we broke truce on sacred ground." He stopped a few feet from her, eyes flicking to Cade. "And they'll kill each other before dawn." Cade took a step closer to her other side, close enough for Mara to smell pine and smoke on him. "There's one way to keep them from ripping each other apart," he said quietly. "You must choose a mate before the moon sets. One mark will fade. One bond will hold. The packs will accept the blood moon's decision." Mara's laugh was raw and too loud. "Choose? Between you? We've exchanged, what, 5 sentences?" Rowan's mouth curved in something like a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The moon doesn't wait for courtship." She backed up, bumping into Cade's chest. His warmth was startling, like touching a furnace, but the contact steadied her heartbeat for a flicker. She twisted out of his reach and glared at them both. "I'm not a prize." Cade's gaze softened, but his words stayed sharp. "You're a choice. And every heartbeat we stand here, the packs draw closer to bloodshed." The distant drums became howls, layered, overlapping, impatient. The sound crawled through the trees, a living warning. Mara imagined 2 hunting parties sniffing the same trail, weapons and teeth bared. She pictured the local headlines: "Volunteer researcher found dead in ritual dispute." The absurdity was almost enough to make her laugh again. Rowan climbed the creek bank, shaking water from his legs. "The elders will demand proof. They'll want to see her before the packs." "No," Cade's voice cracked like a branch under weight. "That would start the fight early." He looked at Mara. "We keep moving. Safe ground is the old chapel ruins. Neutral territory. You'll be under the moon's light all night there." Mara's throat was dry as sand. And then, Rowan said, "You decide which brother wears your mark when dawn comes." They led her along a deer trail that snaked through pines and hemlock. The forest was a cathedral of shifting shadows, and every so often a far-off howl reminded her that hundreds of wolves, men, women, children in borrowed skins, waited for her choice. Cade walked ahead, shoulders rigid, while Rowan stayed behind her, his presence like a cold draft on her neck. She watched Cade's silhouette, the set of his broad back, and wondered what kind of man leads an entire pack yet trembles at the thought of losing a brother. She glanced at Rowan, who met her eyes without flinching. He looked like someone who'd been forged in rival fire, sharp edges, no apologies. The chapel ruins appeared as a pale skeleton between the trees, crumbling stone walls, a roof long surrendered to moss and moonlight. Wildflowers grew where pews had once been. Cade knelt by a half-buried altar stone, tracing sigils carved so deep even centuries couldn't erase them. "These walls remember peace," he murmured. Rowan snorted. "They remember betrayal too." Mara paced between them, hugging herself. "Tell me why this matters so much. Why can't you 2 packs, 2 alphas, just call a truce?" Cade rose slowly. "Because a century ago, our ancestors tore each other apart under this very moon. The survivors swore the blood moon right would decide future disputes. One bond, one leader, one path. Without it, the old war wakes." Rowan's eyes caught the moonlight silver hard. "And because I won't let Cade rule both packs by default." "You think I want that?" Cade shot back. I want to stop bloodshed. Their voices tangled, low but heated. Mara felt the invisible cords in her chest pull tighter, the left tugged by Cade's steadiness, the right by Rowan's fierce honesty. The forest seemed to lean closer, waiting for her heart to slip. She inhaled the night air, thick with pine and wolf musk. Then tell me you are beyond alpha and rival. Tell me why either of you deserves to decide my life. The brothers fell silent, surprised. The wind rattled a loose stone from the chapel wall. Somewhere far away, another howl rose, a note of warning that the night was running out. Cade rubbed a hand over the back of his neck, as if her demand had peeled off his armor. I was 12 when the packs raided each other last, he said. Rowan's father, our father, died stopping the slaughter. He split his loyalty to keep two families breathing. Since then, every blood moon, we've been circling each other, pretending the truce isn't a noose. I took Blackthorn because someone had to guide them toward peace. It's been 20 years of stopping fights before they start. Rowan leaned against a fallen pillar, eyes narrowed but not hostile. I took Ashfall because someone had to remind them we're wolves, not sheep. Peace without strength isn't peace. Cade wants to blend the packs until the old stories fade. I want the stories to matter. His gaze sharpened on Mara. But I don't want another body on that altar stone. Mara felt the night's weight press down on her shoulders. So your whole world rests on who I kiss at dawn? That's absurd. It's tradition, Rowan said. It's survival, Cade countered. She sank onto a chunk of marble that had once been a pew. The heat at her collarbone pulsed, 2 heartbeats, one on either side. What if I choose no one? Cade crouched beside her, his voice quiet enough that the trees themselves had to lean in. Then both packs believe the other stole your decision. They'll fight until there's nothing left but ash. Rowan's expression softened. And we'll tear each other apart before the sun even rises. Mara stared at her boots. She'd come here to catalog folklore, not become it. The air smelled of damp earth and impending violence. She raised her head. Then I need to know you, not just your titles. Cade, what's your worst failure? The question startled him. He blinked, then said, I let my youngest beta go on a rogue hunt last winter. Thought I'd taught him enough. He didn't come back. Rowan shifted uncomfortably. Mara turned to him. Yours. My pride, he admitted. I refused an alliance 5 years ago because it came from Cade. Wolves died for my grudge. The admission hung in the chapel like a confession. Mara studied them, their strength, their scars, the way their anger was built from loss, not hatred. Outside, the howls rose again, closer now, weaving around the cricket's song. Cade stood, offering her a hand. We should keep watch from the bell tower ruins. If scouts from either pack find us, we'll be forced to claim her early, Rowan finished, brushing dirt from his palms. And the other pack will follow the scent. Mara accepted Cade's hand, her fingers brushing his callous skin. A spark leapt, not magic, but the undeniable thrill of being touched by someone who could crush stone yet handled her like glass. As she climbed the half-broken stairs to the bell tower, Rowan's presence at her back was a second spark, sharper, colder, and no less electric. At the top, the world unfolded. Forests rolling like dark waves, the creek glinting red, the moon a bleeding crown above it all. Ashfall torches burned on one horizon, blackthorn fires flickered on the other. 2 armies of shadows, waiting for dawn or a signal to charge. Rowan rested his elbows on the cracked stone ledge. They'll come looking soon. Cade's hand hovered near Mara's elbow, steadying her against the gusting wind. Then we keep the peace until you're ready. Mara stared at the torches. The choice was impossible, but the longer she looked at the 2 men flanking her, the more she realized they weren't asking her to rescue them. They were asking her to see them. To understand that sometimes even alphas feared the dark. The blood moon climbed higher, washing the world in crimson. The night wasn't over, and neither was her heart's rebellion. Somewhere below, wolves began to move, low growls threading through the trees, heralds of the storm creeping closer. The growls carried on the wind, threads of tension weaving tighter with every heartbeat. Mara gripped the crumbling ledge and felt the pull of both bonds throb against her skin, Cade's a slow, grounding drumbeat, Rowan's a sharp, restless spark. The forest below shifted. Shadows flickered between trunks, silent as ghosts. The packs were on the move. Rowan's eyes tracked the tree line. "Scouts," he said. "Too close." Cade's voice was low, careful. "They're not supposed to cross the neutral ring. They will if they think the other side has you." Rowan's glance swept over Mara, lingering on the mark glowing faintly at her collarbone. "Or her." Mara tore her gaze from the fires in the distance. "Then tell me what I'm supposed to do. You've given me history lessons and horror stories, but what makes you believe you're the right choice?" Rowan straightened, the moonlight painting his scars silver. "Because I don't hide what I am. I've bled for Ashfall. I've fought for every wolf under my command. I won't lie to you with pretty promises about peace that never lasts." His expression softened for a heartbeat. "But I'd fight 100 more battles if it meant sparing you one tear." Cade met her eyes, steady as stone. "Because I've seen what endless war does to families. To pups. I've spent my life trying to build something stronger than anger. I don't need you to save me or my pack. I need you to stand with me so no one else dies tonight." Mara's throat tightened. These weren't just two alphas, they were two worlds, two visions of survival. She thought of the research she'd planned, detached observation, footnotes on ritual. Now she was the footnote, the cautionary tale. A branch snapped below. Then another. Dark shapes moved between trees, quick flashes of fur, glints of eyes. Cade cursed under his breath. "They're circling," Rowan said. "They'll flush us into the clearing." Cade gripped Mara's arm gently but firmly. "We move now." Through the bell tower's rear steps, down the ridge. "The old hunting path will keep us hidden." They descended into the chapel's skeleton, stones whispering underfoot. The night smelled of wet leaves and adrenaline. Every howl felt like a timer clicking down. As they crept along the ridge, a torch flared ahead too close. A figure in ashfall gray stepped into view, spear in hand. His eyes widened when he saw Mara between the brothers. Rowan hissed, "Stay back," but the scout's shout split the forest, echoing through the trees like a flare. In an instant, distant howls turned urgent. From the opposite side, blackthorn wolves answered. The air snapped with the promise of violence. Cade's jaw clenched. "They'll be on us in minutes." Mara's pulse hammered. "Then what?" Rowan looked at her, then at his brother. "Then we stop being rivals long enough to keep her alive." They broke into a run, the forest a blur of teeth and crimson light. Mara stumbled on a root. Cade caught her waist, his touch firm but fleeting, before Rowan yanked a low branch out of her path. Their movements were a rough, unspoken choreography born of necessity. They burst into a hollow where moonlight pooled like liquid fire. For a heartbeat, everything was still, the blood moon overhead, their breaths visible in the chill. But the howls closed in. Rowan spun, scanning the trees. "They'll corner us here." Cade's eyes met his brother's. Something old and unspoken passed between them, a truce older than grudges. "Then we hold the line." Mara stepped between them, chest heaving. "No," she said, voice shaking but loud enough to reach the trees. "We end this before it starts." Silence rolled out, as if even the wolves waited to hear what a single human might declare under a cursed moon. The silence broke with the soft crunch of paws on leaves. Shadows spilled into the hollow, first a few scouts, then a tightening ring of wolves, coats bristling under the blood moon's glare. Amber eyes glowed like coals in the dark. Torches flared on the slopes above, their light catching blades, teeth, and the outlines of more wolves shifting into human form. Mara could feel the pull of the marks inside her, hot and aching. Cade's presence steadied her on her left. Rowan's restless energy sparked on her right. Every instinct screamed to flee, but another part, stubborn and furious, refused to be a bystander to slaughter. An elder stepped forward from the blackthorn ranks, an older woman with silver-streaked hair and scars lacing her arms like stories. "You've brought her here?" Her voice was gravel and thunder. "And you dare carry her between packs?" Rowan squared his shoulders. "We didn't bring her. The moon chose her." From Ashfall's side, a younger alpha female bared her teeth. Two marks. Two brothers. Two lies. The wolves around them stirred, low growls rolling like distant thunder. Cade stepped forward, hands raised. "Enough." The blood moon rite is older than our grudges. It demands choice, not chaos. Mara's heart thudded. She stepped between them, raising her voice to a trembling shout. Then hear me. Her words cut through the noise like a bell. You all talk about choice, but none of you have given me one beyond death or obedience. I won't pick a mate just to stop a war you've all been feeding for generations. A ripple of shock swept the hollow. Rowan's jaw tightened, but there was pride glinting in his silver eyes. Cade's lips pressed thin, but he didn't move to silence her. She took a step closer to the elder. You want your traditions honored? Fine. But I'm not some artifact to be passed between rivals. If the moon chose me, maybe it chose me to change the rules. Murmurs stirred through the ranks. Somewhere a torch sputtered, and in that fragile hush Mara heard the wings of an owl beat overhead, a small, ordinary sound reminding her that life outside this madness still existed. Rowan moved beside her, his voice low but carrying. The blood moon rite has only ever known two options, accept a bond or spill blood. He looked at Cade, then at the packs. But maybe the moon isn't the only thing that can change. Cade let out a slow breath, tension easing from his shoulders. If we stand down, if we let her live without forcing her hand tonight, can either pack claim victory? Or can we both claim survival? The elders studied Mara, then the brothers. Her gaze was old steel, but her tone softened. The moon's will is law. Yet law must live, not petrify. If both alphas agree to a dawn council, to lay down arms until the next moon, I will hold my wolves. Rowan nodded. Ashfall will hold. Cade echoed. Blackthorn will hold. The growls ebbed, replaced by restless whispers. Torches lowered. The ring of wolves loosened and began to melt back into the trees, a tide receding after nearly swallowing the shore. As the hollow emptied, the three of them remained, the blood moon burning above like a witness. Mara's knees wobbled as adrenaline drained away. Rowan touched her shoulder lightly, a question in the gesture. Cade's gaze met hers, full of relief and something quieter, hope, perhaps, or gratitude. Mara looked between them, her voice barely more than a whisper. I didn't choose either of you tonight. Rowan's lips curved, half smile, half grimace. No, you chose everyone. Cade's hand brushed the ruined chapel map from her jacket pocket, tucking it back gently. The night isn't over. But for now, no blood spills. They began the long walk back to the chapel ruins. Above them, the blood moon inched toward the horizon, still bleeding its strange light across the world. A reminder that choice, even deferred, could reshape history. The forest was quieter now, as if the trees themselves had exhaled after holding their breath for centuries. The distant torches faded, swallowed by darkness, until only the moon's dying crimson wash lit their path. Mara's boots crunched over fallen needles as she walked between Cade and Rowan. The tension between them had softened, not gone, but tempered, like iron cooled in water. She could feel them both watching her when they thought she wasn't looking. Cade's gaze lingered with quiet steadiness, a man measuring what hope might cost. Rowan's was sharper, quick glances that flickered like sparks, unashamed of wanting but unwilling to beg. At the chapel ruins, the old stones glowed faintly under the waning blood moon. Mara sank onto a fallen pew, exhaustion settling into her bones. Is this what it's always like? She asked, voice hoarse. Living on the edge of war because of tradition? Rowan lowered himself to the altar steps, elbows on his knees. It's what we were born into. Tradition's a leash disguised as honor. Cade crouched beside her, careful not to crowd her. But tonight proved it doesn't have to be. She looked up at the sky. The moon's deep red had begun to pale at the edges, silver creeping back in. The pull of the marks had softened too, less of a tug-of-war, more of a quiet hum, a reminder of choice, not a command. Rowan's voice broke the stillness. The council at dawn won't be easy. Elders love their grudges. Cade glanced at his brother, a faint smile ghosting across his lips. They'll listen. They felt the shift tonight. Mara studied them, these rival alphas who had almost been enemies and almost been killers, and now sat within arm's reach of each other because she'd refused to be a prize. A part of her wanted to laugh at the absurdity, another part wanted to weep for how close it had come to bloodshed. Rowan rose, brushed dust from his hands, and offered her a hand up. "You don't owe either of us," he said quietly. "But you saved us all." Cade added, "Whatever choice you make, whenever you make it, it will be yours, not the moon's." Mara took Rowan's hand and stood. The forest beyond the chapel was beginning to brighten, the first threads of dawn unspooling through the pines. The blood moon sagged low on the horizon, a dying ember against a waking sky. She turned to face them both, a strange peace settling in her chest. "Then, let's make sure your packs hear that before old grudges drown it out." Rowan's silver eyes softened. "We'll stand with you." Cade nodded. Together, for once. As they stepped out of the chapel's broken doorway, the first sunbeam caught the edge of a toppled bell, making it glow like gold. Somewhere far off, a wolf howled a long, low note that was not a threat but a call, a promise carried on the morning wind. Mara tightened her jacket against the chill and followed the two brothers down the path. The dawn was theirs now, fragile but unbroken, and for the first time since the blood moon rose, hope felt heavier than fear. The forest ahead stretched endless and alive, waiting for the choice she would one day make, not as a pawn of tradition, but as Mara Hale, the woman who had rewritten a legend before the sun. The trail wound downward into a valley washed in morning mist. Birdsong threaded through the trees, tentative at first, then bolder, as if the forest was testing the world's new balance. Dew beaded on every pine needle, tiny suns catching the first light. Mara followed the brothers in silence, her boots leaving soft impressions in the damp earth. Ahead, the path forked, one route bent toward Ashfall's rugged peaks, the other toward Blackthorn's shadowed lowlands. At the crossroads stood a weathered stone carved with runes so old their meaning had blurred into legend. Cade paused beside the stone. "This was where our father made his last stand," he said quietly. He held this ground alone until the packs came to their senses. Rowan touched the runes with scarred fingers. "He died here, between two homes he couldn't choose between." Mara stepped closer, tracing the grooves with her gaze. "And now you expect me to pick what he couldn't?" Rowan met her eyes, not a challenge, but a recognition. "Not expect. Hope." Cade's voice was steadier. "But only when you're ready." The mist curled around their legs like smoke from an old battlefield. Mara crouched and placed her palm against the cold stone. The marks beneath her collarbone pulsed faintly, not in conflict now, but in quiet agreement, as if acknowledging that choice didn't have to be a knife splitting worlds. She stood, shouldering her pack. "Let's get to your council before rumor outruns truth." They took the Blackthorn path first, winding toward the clearing where elders from both sides had agreed to meet. Along the way, wolves lingered in the shadows, curious scouts, wide-eyed pups peeking from behind trunks, old sentries with wary gazes. None moved to stop them. The story of the night had already begun to spread, whispers carried on the wind like pollen. At the edge of a meadow, tents and banners fluttered in the early breeze. Elders from both packs gathered in a wide circle, their expressions a mix of suspicion and wonder. The air was tense but not hostile. Rowan stepped forward and spoke first. "The moon's rite is fulfilled. The woman lives. No blood was spilled." A Blackthorn elder squinted at Mara's marks, now faint but unmistakable. "She bears both. That has never happened." Mara stepped into the circle before the brothers could answer. "Maybe that's the point," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "Maybe the moon's telling you the old rules don't work anymore." Murmurs rippled through the council. Cade watched her with quiet pride. Rowan's lips twitched, a rare flicker of admiration. An Ashfall matriarch finally nodded. "Then tonight's story will be told differently." She turned to the others. "Let the pack stand down. Let this blood moon mark the beginning of talks, not war." No cheers followed, only the collective exhale of wolves who had nearly bled for nothing. Yet that breath felt like the first breeze after a long winter. As the council dispersed, Cade and Rowan lingered beside Mara at the meadow's edge. The sun was fully above the horizon now, burning away the last traces of crimson sky. Cade said softly, "You could walk away now. No bonds. No packs. Just a woman who changed the course of two histories." Rowan's smirk was faint but genuine. "Or you could stay." See what kind of world you've made. Mara looked at them both. The steadfast leader and the fierce challenger, two halves of a broken legacy, and felt the marks hum once more, a gentle echo instead of a tug-of-war. She smiled, small but certain. I'll walk with you for a while, she said. See where the path leads. They began toward the forest together, three silhouettes against a sunlit meadow, leaving behind an old war and stepping into a story that was no longer bound to a single blood moon. The legend would spread of a woman who refused to be a prize and, in doing so, gave two rival alphas a future worth fighting for, not over. And somewhere, deep in the quiet woods, the old chapel bell, long fallen and forgotten, gave a single, soft chime in the breeze, as if even the ruins approved. The morning stretched into full day, sunlight dripping through the canopy like melted gold. As they walked, the valley unfurled into rolling meadows and streams veined with silver light. The sharp tang of pine was replaced by the sweeter scent of wildflowers, and birds wheeled overhead, bold enough now to sing without fear. Mara felt the tension in her shoulders ease for the first time since the moon had risen. Every step away from the battlefield felt like reclaiming her own heartbeat. The forest no longer watched her as prey or prize, it simply was, alive and immense. Rowan walked slightly ahead, scanning the path with his habitual wariness. Cade stayed near Mara's shoulder, not to guard her but to share the view. Occasionally, their hands brushed, light touches that sparked memories of the night's intensity without demanding anything more. They stopped beside a brook to drink. Rowan crouched and let the water run through his fingers. The elders will argue for weeks, he said, glancing up at Cade. But they won't dare cross each other now. Cade filled his canteen, his dark braid catching the sunlight. They'll bicker and posture. But we've bought them time. And hope. Mara cupped water in her palms, the cold bite of it shocking her awake. Do you ever think, she said quietly, that the moon chose me not to pick a mate, but to show you both another way? Rowan met her gaze. I thought that before you even said it aloud. Cade nodded once, solemn. Tradition can trap wolves as easily as men. They rested on a fallen log, the three of them sharing silence that was no longer strained. A butterfly landed on Mara's knee, wings painted in orange and black. She watched it for a long moment before whispering, Last night, I thought I was going to die. But now, she hesitated, searching for the right shape of her thoughts. Now I think this is just the beginning of my story. Rowan's grin was fleeting but warm. Ours too. The afternoon waned as they followed the trail toward the distant foothills. By the time they reached the overlook, a ridge where the land dropped away to reveal both Ashfall's rugged peaks and Blackthorn's dark valleys. The sky was a deepening blue. The sun bled into the horizon, orange fading to purple. Below, two packs moved through their territories, hunting parties returning, pups tumbling at the edges of campfires, sentries exchanging nods instead of threats. For the first time in decades, no torches flared in anger across the boundary line. Cade stood beside Mara at the edge of the cliff. Tomorrow, we start the hard work, talks, treaties, old grievances dug up and mended. Rowan leaned on a boulder, arms crossed, but eyes softened. But tonight, we breathe. Mara closed her eyes, letting the wind carry the sense of both territories, smoke, pine, wild earth, and felt the faint hum of her marks quiet at last. The choice would come someday. But not today. Today, the world was wide, the future unwritten, and the legend of the Blood Moon Bride was hers to shape. As twilight deepened, the first stars appeared, scattered like silver sparks across a vast, forgiving sky. The three of them stood together, a fragile alliance beneath the heavens, watching as the last trace of crimson slipped beneath the horizon and the forest whispered its approval in the language of rustling leaves. The blood moon was gone, but its promise lingered in the healed silence between rivals, in the heartbeat of a woman who refused to be claimed, and in the horizon that stretched out before them like a road they'd walk, side by side, into whatever stories waited beyond dawn. The stars wheeled overhead, unfamiliar yet comforting in their quiet persistence. Mara stretched her arms, the cool night air brushing her skin like an unspoken blessing. The brothers sat near the ridge's edge, Rowan idly tossing small stones into the abyss, Cade sharpening a hunting knife more out of habit than need. A soft breeze rattled the pines, carrying distant howls, peaceful this time, almost playful. It was the sound of packs dispersing for the night, their tension dissolved into routine. Mara realized she was hearing a new kind of music, the lullaby of two nations deciding, tentatively, to live. She lowered herself onto the grass beside Cade. The blade in his hands flashed briefly under starlight, then disappeared as he sheathed it. "You're calmer than I expected," she said. He gave a faint, crooked smile. "I've been waiting my whole life to see Rowan stop scowling long enough to listen." Rowan snorted, skipping another stone. "Don't get used to it." But the bite in his voice was gone. His words were a tease now, not a threat. Mara tilted her head back, watching a shooting star burn across the heavens. "This place will remember tonight," she said. "Maybe not my name, maybe not the details, but something changed here." Cade leaned back on his palms, his profile sharp against the sky. "Legends have a way of growing on their own. By next winter, someone will swear you called lightning or tamed wolves with a song." Rowan chuckled. "Or that you chose us both and made us share you under the moon." Mara rolled her eyes, but the laugh that escaped her was genuine. "Let them tell whatever stories they need. We'll know the truth." The three of them stayed on the ridge until the stars blurred at the edges and the horizon began to pale. When they finally rose, stretching stiff limbs, the valley below shimmered with morning dew. The faint hum beneath Mara's collarbone was quiet now, a lingering echo of magic, a reminder that her path was hers to forge. Rowan brushed past her, deliberately casual, but she caught the brief warmth of his hand grazing hers. Cade fell into step on her other side, his silent steadiness an anchor against the world's chaos. As they descended toward the waking forest, a wolf's howl rose from deep in the blackthorn woods, a long, low note that sounded less like a challenge and more like a benediction. Another answered from Ashfall's peaks, and the two calls twined together over the valley, a duet instead of a duel. Mara smiled, stepping into the day with her unlikely companions. The blood moon bride was no longer a warning whispered around campfires. It had become a promise that even the oldest wounds could heal, that choice could rewrite destiny, and that sometimes the bravest thing was simply to walk forward, unclaimed, into the vast and waiting dawn. By the time they reached the valley floor, dawn had burned the last traces of night from the sky. Sunlight filtered through the mist, scattering rainbows across the wet grass. The air was fresh in a way that felt almost ceremonial, like the world had been rinsed clean overnight. Mara felt the weight of her pack dig into her shoulders, grounding her in this new reality. Cade walked on her left, every step deliberate, the rhythm of a man who thought 3 moves ahead even when the war was over. Rowan ambled on her right, his gait loose but watchful, always scanning the edges of the trail. 2 wolves, 2 different heartbeats, flanking her like an unspoken vow. They reached a cluster of stones where the creek widened, its surface bright as a mirror. Cade crouched to refill his canteen, and Mara knelt beside him, watching minnows dart beneath the water skin. For a heartbeat she caught their reflections, 3 figures side by side, framed by wild country and an open sky. The marks on her collarbone, faded now, were just faint smudges of color, but they pulsed once, a whisper of what had passed. Rowan skipped a stone across the creek, the ripples widening toward the opposite bank. "By tonight, half the valley will think you were a goddess," he said. Cade smirked faintly. "The other half will think you bewitched us both." Mara let the cool water run through her fingers. "Let them. The truth is stranger and simpler." They rose and continued through the trees, the trail sloping toward Blackthorn's edge where the council had gathered hours before. The banners were gone now, the meadow empty except for trampled grass and lingering scents of smoke and wolf musk. It felt less like a battlefield and more like a place between stories, one tale finished, another not yet begun. Cade stopped at the tree line, gazing across the fields toward his homeland. Rowan paused too, looking back toward the mountains. Between them, Mara saw 2 kingdoms that could have been tombs and realized they were instead becoming possibilities. "You could stay here," Cade said softly. The packs will respect your space. Rowan added, or you could walk with Ashfall for a while. Learn our ways before you decide anything. Mara shook her head gently, a small smile tugging at her lips. Or I could walk my own path for now. I think the moon gave me that right. Neither argued. They only nodded, each in his own way accepting that the choice had already shifted the world. Mara stepped forward, the grass damp under her boots, and felt the horizon beckon. She didn't know where the trail would lead, whether back to research and city streets or deeper into wolflands where old stories waited to be rewritten. But she knew she would walk it on her terms. Behind her, two alphas watched not as rivals, not as claimants, but as men who had been changed by a single human's defiance. And when Mara glanced back one last time, she saw something like hope in both their eyes. The sun climbed higher, burning away the mist, and the valley opened before her wild, untamed, and waiting. Somewhere, far off, a single bell chimed from the ruins of the old chapel, its echo threading through the hills like a blessing. The Blood Moon Bride had chosen freedom, and in doing so, had given the packs a future brighter than any prophecy dared to promise. Mara squared her shoulders, inhaled the crisp morning air, and walked on, her story no longer bound to the blood moon but to every sunrise yet to come. The ridge fell away behind her, its jagged silhouette fading against a sky bright with possibility. Mara didn't look back again. The choice to keep walking felt like its own kind of magic, a quiet spell that broke the oldest curses. Birds scattered ahead of her steps, startled into a whirl of wings and sunlight. The trail narrowed as it dipped into a thicket of birch, their pale trunks gleaming like polished bone. Mara slowed her pace, letting the hush of the woods soak into her skin. Each breath tasted clean pine resin, damp earth, the faint sweetness of wildflowers. The marks on her collarbone were only a whisper now, but she could still feel them humming FAI.